Welcome back to the Weekend Ball Podcast. I am Alex. My name's Alex Adams. I'm live here in Jakarta, Indonesia, covering Team Canada at the FIBA World Cup. Canada's just won its third game of the first round against Latvia in a pretty commanding fashion after a pretty slow start. I'm joined by the one of the best in the business today, Michael Grange of Sportsnet. Michael, thanks so much for taking the time and doing this.
Oh, my pleasure, Alex, and thanks for being so flexible in your timing. I didn't realize it was 5:30 in the morning over there. So uh, anyway, good on you, and congrats on the assignment. And I'm sure you're having quite an experience.
Yeah, no, thanks, Michael. And no worries. I think I'm just in a vampire mode for the next 2 weeks. Just not a lot of sleep, but it's been really, really fun, and I'm excited for the rest of the. I think I have maybe 5 days. I don't know. What are we? Wednesday. Time is just all over the place these days. So, Michael, before we get started with the team right now and how they've been doing at the World Cup, just as someone who's covered the Raptors for so long and as well Canada basketball, but what was maybe when were you first introduced to the Canadian men's national team and program for you, Michael?
Well, like I would say as a fan, and I was kind of lucky when I was in my 20s at playing university basketball. Um, the early 20s, late teens, but the my head coach at the time, Dave Crook, was affiliated with the national team then, and he kind of has a distinction of leading a young men's team. I think they call it U21. They won a bronze medal at
Hmm.
the Worlds, I think in 2005, and that was the first medal Canada had won since the Olympics of any kind. And so anyway, that was he was kind of an assistant on uh, around that national team program, and also a friend of mine was one of the assistant trainers. Guys now a trainer with the Las Vegas with the Vegas Golden Knights, and
Huh.
so I remember the summers when I was at university, they would, in particular, as they were getting ready to go to the '88 Olympics, getting to watch them train, being in the gym, seeing Eli Pasquale, Norm Clark,
Huh.
Jerry Kazanowski, all these guys.
Cool.
So those were like iconic guys to me. I remember playing pickup basketball at Hard House at U of T, and Dwight Walton coming in and playing 2-on-2 with him, and Dave Turcotte played 1-on-1 against Dave Turcotte once. Took like 7 buckets off him, so it was like maybe my career high point. I don't know. I'm sure if I don't think Dave was going too hard, but anyway, it was so going right back then. The national team way that was obviously a long, long time before the Raptors were, or the NBA was kind of a prominent thing. Obviously, I was a fan of it, but it wasn't present in your life.
Hmm.
And so the national team was the highest expression of the sport in this country. So any kind of connection you had with it, I had very dear friends who played on the women's Olympic program
Hmm.
around the same time. So that's what it was my entry exposure to it. And so you always tracked it ever since then. And even before that, I remember watching, Jay Triano and those guys at the '84 games. That'd be probably my first memory. Um, and I think they finished fourth in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. And so, going back to them, that's, I guess, what I would say. And then to cover it professionally, I probably, it might have been kind of, I think I covered was the Tournament of the Americas for the U21s. I just
Hmm.
They don't have that category anymore. It was in Halifax, and I convinced the Globe and Mail to go out and cover it, and that was my first opportunity there. And Chris Paul was in that tournament, Charlie Villanueva,
Oh, cool.
JJ Barea was in that one, and so it was a neat experience.
And with that, just covering the team and maybe the program for so long, you wrote just why Canada's destruction of France could be the tipping point for the national program. Just maybe tell us a little bit more about that piece and just what you mean by that, in terms of it being a tipping point, that win. And I'm sure now them going 3-0 and beating Latvia didn't maybe change your mind at all on how you felt.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I doubled down. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just a giant win, and I mean, you know, I've been lucky. I've covered this team in some shape or form through many iterations, and through some real low points, and I was close with people who were on those teams and coached those teams going back to like the World Cup in 2010, and they finished, I think, they didn't win a game. So I don't know what
Yeah,
that gets you. It was something pretty low. And they lost to Lebanon and
I remember
Kelly
that. Yeah.
Olynyk was just 19 years old. So, and it wasn't like those people in those programs cared less or weren't as motivated or right through the organization, everyone had the same passion and feeling. They just, for a number of reasons, systemic, logistics, just the cycle of talent, they just couldn't kind of achieve their goals. And so you go to, I think it was 2011 at the Tournament of Americas when I think it was Jay Tranel's first year as coach, and they had Corey Joseph was on a team, and they almost qualified for the Worlds that year, but our old friend Louis Scola pumped him for about 30 points in a decisive game. It was just incredible. And I remember broadcasting that game from studio like I'm doing now
Mhm.
with Sportsnet now, and that was kind of the beginning. That was where they were really trying to turn things around, and we thought they would reach a lot of these goals in 2015 in Mexico City.
Mhm.
And they came very, very close. It's a kind of like a mythic game in Canadian basketball history, but they were like this close to qualifying for the 2016 Olympics. And that team had, people forget, they had 8 or 9 NBA players on that team. I think Kelly Olynyk, I think, was the oldest. He was 23.
Mhm.
Wiggins was on that team. Bennett was on that team. Stauskas was on that team. It was an excellent team. And, and you kind of wonder what would have happened had they qualified. They broke through. So many of these issues and challenges they'd faced over the years would have just melted away. And so, long answer, but, I think that game against France, the win against France, um, to me, it sort of was the final nail in the coffin in that whole almost 10, 15 year history of frustration and heartbreak and all of that. It was Canada taking a really good team, and Canada playing to its own potential against a really good opponent at a critical moment. And even though it's the first game of the tournament, anyone who understands the tournament knows how big a game it was. And for them to execute at that level, I just think it took a lot of weight off a lot of people's shoulders. I think it allowed people to kind of justify what we've all believed all these years. And, I think we're going to look back as, presuming this team does reach its goals and, they make the Olympics next year, they have a good result here at the Worlds, and, the generations coming up behind, and there's a lot of talent still, that is going to
Mhm.
funnel into this program over the next decade or so. They're going to come into it with the expectation of being the best in the world. And I think that's the new leading off point. Hopefully it happens. We can't predict the future, but I think if and when it does happen, that's why I felt that moment we'll look back at it as kind of the end of the beginning and the beginning of
Mhm.
something new.
Mhm. And with that, like, just how has this team come together so quickly? Like, they haven't played together really as a collective unit. And like every time I ask the players a question about how have you kind of got chemistry together, it's been less than a month, which is always a bit shocking to say. How do you think they've done that? And maybe how has Jordi Fernandez really been able to bring this team just to be so kind of locked in and engaged and just been playing so well so quickly as a team?
Yeah, well, it's a tribute to Jordy, and I'm not going to pretend, you're there, I'm not.
Yeah.
So I'm going to defer to your insights there because I was around him when they were here at training camp. I certainly spoke to people who've worked with him in the past, and everyone says great things, and he says all the right things as far as I've heard.
Hmm.
But his actual impact day to day as this whole process has unfolded, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm sure you
Hmm.
have some. I'm sure you have some insights closer to the ground than I do. Um, as far as the team getting together, it's always been very interesting with the national team program, this gen of it. Let's go say from Corey Joseph and the Tristan Thompson era, 2011 on. Um, this is a very close group of athletes. They're predominantly from Toronto or the GTA. They either, certain segments of them mentored the younger guys, like, Wiggins and RJ Barrett will tell stories about running around when Corey Joseph and them were in the gym, and he was the little kid, and they were fooling around with him, just kind of teasing him along. And then, and so there's the older guys who have had a long-standing connection to some of these younger guys as the core of the kind of the prime guys or the young guys who either grew up playing with each other, against each other, training with each other, and I think sharing a lot too, right? Like they're all going through this NBA experience together, and you see a familiar face. I think that matters. You've got the Nikhil and Shea connections, pretty obvious. The Shea RJ connection is pretty obvious. Dort and Shea, you kind of keep going. There's 0 degrees of separation between all these guys. And so I think because no one's a stranger to each other, they're able to get over all the BS of, look, I don't want to say the wrong thing here. They just come out and say it. I think that's a huge hurdle most teams have to overcome. I don't want to hurt your feelings hurdle. And in this environment, I think it's like, yeah, well, we've been, busting each other's chops since we were 14 years old. So they might not have the technical polish a team like Spain. I would have thought a team like France. I think Latvia we saw has to some degree, minus maybe the depth of talent, but they've made up by that. They've accelerated because of the relationships. Also, they're very, very high IQ players, right? Like, I mean, Shea, you talk to Shea for 5 minutes. He's a smart person, smart basketball player. And this is true of Melvin Edgin, true of Kelly Olynyk, true of Nikhil, true of, they're all guys, Dylan Brooks is a guy who just absorbs game plans and kind of uses them to his advantage. So I think that helps too. These guys are very experienced pros, and you don't get to that level of accomplishment without learning quick and being able to assemble information or kind of assimilate information really quickly.
And just how important is it to have a player like Shea? Like maybe I'm asking the kind of like the obvious question, but what does he bring to this team that maybe like is it like I was 2 years old when Steve Nash was playing for this program, so I can't really relate to how good to compare the two, but like is he better than maybe Nash was in 2000, or is it very similar, or how would you kind of
I mean it's I would say they're fairly different players. But the common thread I think is that they have very, very rare and very exceptional abilities to get teams over the hump in tough situations in the half court. And I would say they would do it differently. So with Nash, not necessarily in order of his preference, but he certainly had the ability to spread the floor as a one of the world's greatest 3-point shooters. I would say his specialty is, probably anyone watching this would know, is his ability to create easy baskets for his teammates out of chaos. And I remember talking to Jalen Rose after he'd been traded to Phoenix. This is a long, long time ago, and I was asking him, what's it like playing with Steve? He goes, you don't even have to dribble. You just kind of hang around, have your hand open, and you're going to get an easy bucket. And so Nash was able to do that for his teammates, and that's just an incredible asset. Shea he's a good playmaker too, but I think his magic is he can actually get the bucket, and he certainly does in the NBA. He did in that third quarter against France, and I thought against Latvia in the second half, especially in the third quarter again, his ability just to create offense out of nothing, and it's the way he's doing it. You can't really defend it. I'm sorry. Maybe just some teams in this tournament can find that specific kind of lengthy. It's going to take a very special defender to really bother Shea, but for the most part, when he gets 2 feet in the paint, and he's either going to shift gears on you and get to the rim, or he's going to use his footwork and get to kind of a little turnaround midi, or he'll just pull up, or these are all shots that are at the high level of difficulty, but he makes it easy, and because it's so easy for him, he can just crumple a defense, and I think have someone on your team who can do that 2 or 3 possessions in a row when things might get sticky, or the shot's not falling, I mean, it just gets you over the hump. And so you're not looking at, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute scoring droughts, which in a 40-minute game is massive.
Yeah.
He's going, you know what, for the next 2, 3 minutes, I'm going to score 12 points. And that just greases the wheels for everybody.
And going from SGA to a player that I've really felt just being on the ground and just watching the games, that has really been almost the heart of this team, has been Kelly Olynyk. And how, for you, Michael, just what does he bring to this team, that obviously in the NBA he's a good player, but in FIBA, like I keep saying, it's FIBA Kelly. Just why is he maybe going to FIBA like a duck to water, and just in terms of his game, and like why do you think he's such an effective FIBA
He's,
player?
I think he's like FIBA Jokic, like, I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably a little high praise, but there are some parallels in terms of what he can bring to a team. And, you know, for those who don't know, Kelly Olynyk was a point guard, right? He grew up the son of a coach, Ken Olynyk, who had national team ties, going way back. And, he was raised as a point guard who happened to grow to be 7 feet.
Hmm.
And when Leo Rautins put him on the team in 2010, I don't even know if he'd started at Gonzaga then, might have been it after his first year. That's what he had identified, that special ability to kind of see the floor, handle the ball, make plays for other people. And, in the NBA, he shows it. He's good with it. But the reality is, in that league, if you look at the teams he's been on, going back to Boston, Miami, even now in Utah, there are guys who are paid more to do more. And, so Kelly Olynyk has a role. He executes it at a high level. He's appreciated for it. But, there's somebody being paid literally in this day and age $40 to $50 million to make plays. And so, the role that Kelly is slotted in an NBA game is limited. And that's true of
Hmm.
many, many players. And, if you want to survive in that league, you accept it, and you kind of, you roll with it. And, but in this format, because the ball's going to be in his hands, the full capacity of his basketball brain gets to be exercised, and he's got the skills to go with it. And I think also at this level, in the NBA, 6'11", whatever size he is, he's not this freak athlete by NBA standards. He can't really impose his will quite the same way in a FIBA game, with the exception of a couple of teams, a couple of matchups. He's probably the better athlete. He's the bigger athlete. He's a stronger athlete. And
Mm.
so I think he's just able to like affect the game in a bigger way.
That's interesting, because that's something I've been almost thinking about with RJ, why he's been so good. I asked him just how his game's translated from FIBA, from the NBA to FIBA, and he said the paint's wide open, which I found was a very interesting just comment, because it shouldn't be the case, with the defensive 3 seconds obviously not being a part of the game. What have you seen in RJ, and just how cool is it, just that with his, obviously Rowan being the GM and his ties to Canada basketball, how cool is it just to have someone that like bleeds Canada basketball, being such an effective player for Canada?
Well, I think it's great, and I really liked what he did against Latvia. I think RJ to me is a real swing piece for this team. Um, you look at his NBA career, especially the last couple of years. You look at his shooting, and he'll have a month where he's shooting about 27% from three, and it looks pretty bad. And then he'll have a month where he shoots literally mid 40s from three, and he looks like he's going to be an all-star. And like, I know he's working hard to kind of lift up the lows and smooth out the high, get more
Hmm.
consistent in that area. But the reality is on this team, as you go along this tournament, I think teams are going to try and get the ball out of Shea's hands. Why wouldn't you? You have to.
Yeah.
And you look at the quality of 3-point looks that RJ has got, not just RJ, but others, they're wide open. And as long as the Canada goes side to side with the ball, once it gets out of Shea's hands, you're going to get a catch and shoot. You're going to have your feet set. You're going to have a good look at the rim. And, coming into the game against Lithuania, Latvia, I think he was shooting like 31%. I don't know the volume, but there'd been a lot of good looking shots he hadn't connected. Today he was 4-6 from three. I think, that's going to be, to me, a real swing story as this tournament goes along. Is the ball's going to find guys, it's going to find them open, And, to the extent Nikhil, Shea, Dylan, Lou Dort, if and when he comes back, I presume he comes back. Those guys, RJ, when those guys are knocking down what are going to be really good open looks, if they are, Canada's going to go really deep. They're going to be a big problem. If they're not, as you saw, say in the first half against Latvia, it doesn't look as good.
And then with it, like, do you think against the better teams that maybe the USA's, the Germany's, the Australia's, that Canada does have enough shooting to maybe when they collapse around Shea to make it kind of, make it count and obviously make enough shots to against the best teams in the world?
I think they have just enough. I mean, I feel a lot better if they had like a Kyle Korver type sniper, just a guy who just panics defense. I don't think, I think if you're game planning for Canada right now, you might gamble a little bit and go, you know what? We're going to wait and see if Dylan Brooks can hurt us. We're going to wait and see if RJ Barrett can hurt us, because we know Shea Gilgeous-Alexander can hurt us. And so, but as I'm saying, like, these guys are all capable. I think the way Nikhil's shooting, and it's a continuation of what he did last year. Like, he's potentially lethal. And, so I do think they have just enough, but they've got to be the right guys on the right day in the right moment. And that's kind of true always, right?
Yeah.
But I think you'd be less. I think other teams would be a lot more concerned if you had Joe Ingles as an example, like kind of waiting on the weak side for the ball to swing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say any of these guys aren't capable of making those shots. And if they do, Canada's going to be a big problem.
And it hasn't just been all offense for Canada. Their defense has been stifling. And Jordy Fernandez, when we were at the training camp, talked about defense and Canada wanting to be the best defensive team in the tournament. And they, by some metrics, have been so far. Michael, what do you think has made this team so good defensively? Is it just the ball hawks and Dylan Brooks's, Lou Dort's, just and how are they kind of maybe a lot kind of still maintaining a really good defense with maybe a lack of kind of shot blocking and rim protection?
Yeah, I think they have. I think they have enough guys who have the mentality, first of all, right? So, Dylan Brooks, he knows why he's making $80 million, and I think Lou Dort clearly knows why he's making, I think, $90 million,
Yeah.
and Nikhil Alexander-Walker is a very interesting case where it's beginning to sink in for him what he needs to do to be, a 10, 12, 14-year NBA player, right? And on the way, probably make $150 million, right? It's and I was talking about Kelly earlier, just, for Nikhil, it's going to be, these are the two things I have to excel at. And it might mean not showing my full bag, but if I do, there's a job for me for life, kind of. And, and part of that, as we saw down the stretch, against in that sort of play-in game for the play-in between Minnesota and OKC at the end of last season, the way he locked up Shea, the job he did on Jamal Murray in the first round of the playoffs. He's capable, right? And I think so that's three guys who understand, why and how they can make money in the NBA. And then you have a bunch of other guys who are like RJ Barrett is not, I don't think he's going all defense anytime soon, but he's a smart, capable, willing defender. I think, you got a guy like Shea. He's a playmaking defender, right? Like he's not a lock guy down. He's not going to run nor would you want him to be spinning around a whole bunch of screens and blowing his shoulder out. But, he's good. A lot of those guys at his level, the genius they have offensively allows them to kind of casually make plays defensively and shows up block shots, steals, deflections, those kinds of things, just little things around the ball. Next thing they're gone. So, they have enough guys. They have a lot of switchability. And again, going back to the IQ, I think the passion is there. That's obviously a big part of it. And, I think they have reason to expect themselves to be one of, if not the best teams in the tournament defensively. I mean, minus a true rim protecting shot blocker, they're probably the most athletic team in the league next to the United States. So, that should translate defensively, and I think we've seen signs of it doing so far.
Just quickly, how do you think, or why has, or I don't know, like I'm just so impressed with Dylan Brooks in terms of just his shot selection and the way he's played for Canada so far. What do you think's maybe changed for him from maybe the way he played in Minnesota, in Memphis, and now obviously in Houston, because he's just really not taking any bad shots, which I was really worried about, just his shot selection, and he really doesn't take any anymore. So I don't, what's changed there, Michael?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can only speculate. Could be as simple as his job description, right? Like it's like, and I think when you come to play for the national team, you're obviously not doing it for money. You're doing it because you honor and respect the people you're playing with and the purpose. And so I think in that environment, it's maybe a little easier to say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice this, this, and that if I need to. And it could be coaching as well. Like if you're being recognized the right way, and it could be teammates
Mm,
recognizing, respecting what you're bringing. Then it gets a little, it's like people aren't that complicated, right? Like when they're valued for certain things and respected for certain things, they're more likely to respond in kind, right? So, not being in the room, I don't know, but I mean, I would say that I'm not like a good buddy with Dylan Brooks, but I do kind of know him a little bit, and the image that has he's certainly had a hand in creating around himself, but I think kind of took on a life of its own, is not really accurate and precise to the person he is and the spirit he has. And I think in this environment, a lot of guys really love playing for the national team because a lot of NBA bullshit, if I can say that,
mhm.
gets tossed out the window, right?
Yeah.
You're not competing for minutes, you're not competing for paychecks, you're not a rival with anyone on your own roster. Um, you're not trying to earn an award. You're not trying to it's not your
Uh,
career. It's your
yeah.
passion.
Mm.
And so I think, that's a reason a lot of players are come to a national team program and are willing to do things a little differently.
And before I let you go, Michael, obviously Canada came to this tournament with two things in mind. Firstly, getting an Olympic spot, and then maybe getting a medal. They keep talking about they have 7 or 8 straight game sevens, and then hopefully to win the whole tournament. But for you, Michael, what are your expectations? How far do you see them going? Do you see them getting the Olympic spot? Obviously, for people that don't know, Dominican is probably their toughest test alongside the USA for those two spots. Just what do you think probably ends up if I ask you to be Nostradamus and tell us what will happen in the end? What do you think will happen in the end, Michael?
I mean, I think this team is going to get an Olympic spot, but as you point out, even though when we have this conversation, like there's basically by the time this thing airs, there's probably going to be 4 teams in the Americas competing for 2 spots, right? It's going to be Brazil, Dominican, USA, and Canada. Um, the problem for Canada is you only play Brazil, right? And so you're hoping that you beat Brazil, you beat Spain, you advance, and that maybe Dominican stumbles, or if not, you advance beyond them, and you're kind of assuming the U.S. will. So um, I think it's very obvious that Canada is the second best team of the 7
Mhm.
from the Americas that are here, but they can't control what happens with the Dominican. They can only control their own thing. I think if things unfold as they should, Canada does get a spot. And it's kind of harsh to say, but at this point in the game, you have to say it. If they don't, it will be a failure. Like
Yeah.
it's all the stuff that we're excited about now won't matter if they kind of they can't get out of this next group stage, and Dominican does, and or something happens in the way the seeding goes.
Hmm.
Um, Not to get in all those details, but so that is the mission. And if they don't, it really sets the program back. And if they do, it's a little bit like that game against France. You're in the Olympics. Everyone on the business side of Canada basketball can go start selling those sponsorships, can start hunting the ground, the money, kind of investing, getting a return on the investment they've made at this point. It's a huge, huge, huge thing. And they got to get it done. I
Mhm.
think so. If I'm predicting, I do think that they advance to the semis. Am I going to predict that they would beat the USA, who's the team they would meet in the semis? I'm going to say they can. We've seen, U.S. teams stumble at the Worlds before. They bring a young team, usually not a lot of experience, either together or in FIBA, so they're a little bit vulnerable. On paper, you wouldn't pick Canada, but I think by that time, Canada is going to have a very talented team that's a little bit battle tested, and they certainly won't be intimidated by the guys they play against all the time.
Hmm.
And so, it'd be a heck of a story if they could pull that off. And if they pull that off, then I think they're the gold medalist.
Wow. What do you think it would mean just for basketball in this country if Canada were to make the Olympics or even win the World Cup, but more on the Olympics?
I mean, I think the missing ingredient for basketball in the Canadian landscape is a national team uh, presence and success story. And
Mm.
I think even now, the national team is still a bit of a, it's kind of like a bit of a hardcore crowd is into it. Like,
It is.
I don't think people walking the streets are talking about the national team the way they deserve to be talked about. And the only way that changes is, you look at women's soccer in this country, and before Canada was making runs at at the World Cup and at the Olympics, they very quickly that captivated the country, and I think it put women's soccer in a different place. And people, it just changes perceptions. And so I think that's, you look at what the Raptors have done with their championships, with the presence, with the way they've kind of been a rallying point for basketball fans all across the country. I think, a national team is something different. And if this generation of players can make noise here at a World Cup, make it to an Olympics, and make that World Cup and Olympics cycle a routine, that
Mhm.
they're going to be at the Olympics, multiple Olympics games in a row, and then they end up in a gold medal game. I mean, those are the moments that I think will be transform, maybe the final transformation of what the relation Canada has with the sport.
Mhm. Well, Michael, thanks so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I said before, but I'm just such a big fan of your work. It was really cool to see you in your element in Toronto at training camp and just kind of working there. And yeah, so thanks so much, Michael. And I'm looking forward to your coverage the rest of the way. And hopefully, for the both of our sakes, Canada makes the Olympics and maybe gets a medal or maybe even a gold medal here in Jakarta and then in Manila for the quarterfinals and the final round. So thanks again, Michael. I really, really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day.
Alex, thank you so much for the kind words, and good on you getting over there, and try and get some rest and enjoy it and keep up your own good work.
Thanks a lot, Michael.